It sounds like something straight out of a scandal headline. What kind of wife refuses to watch her husband's most famous films? The rumor quickly spread that Amelia Warner deliberately avoids watching the projects that made Jamie Dornan a global star, especially the ones filled with intense, intimate scenes. To many, it didn't just seem unusual, it felt like a red flag, something hidden beneath the surface of what appeared to be a stable marriage. And almost instantly, people began asking the same uncomfortable question: is this about discomfort, or something deeper? The speculation didn't come out of nowhere. When 50 Shades of Grey catapulted Jamie Dornan into worldwide fame, it also placed his personal life under a microscope unlike anything he had experienced before. The film's bold, controversial nature blurred the line between performance and reality in the eyes of the audience, making it difficult for many to separate the actor from the character he portrayed. As a result, attention quickly shifted from the screen to his real-life relationship, with fans wondering how his wife truly felt about seeing him in such vulnerable, provocative situations. At first, there were only subtle hints, comments made in passing, small details that didn't seem significant until they were connected together. Reports suggested that Amelia Warner had little interest in watching those films, that she hadn't seen them, or chose not to engage with them at all. It wasn't framed as a dramatic statement, but rather as a quiet preference, something personal. However, once that detail reached the public, it quickly transformed into something much bigger than it actually was. Online discussions exploded with theories, many of them built on assumptions rather than facts. Some believed it was a sign of jealousy, a natural reaction to seeing a partner in such intimate on-screen situations. Others took it further, suggesting it hinted at deeper tension, unresolved discomfort, or even unspoken conflict within the relationship. The idea that a spouse would avoid their partner's work didn't fit the image people expected, and that disconnect made the story even more compelling. Media outlets didn't help calm the narrative, they amplified it. Headlines leaned into the emotional angle, emphasizing words like refuses and avoids, subtly turning a personal choice into something that sounded like a deliberate rejection. Interviews were revisited, statements taken out of context, and suddenly a simple preference became a storyline filled with implied drama. The more it was repeated, the more it began to feel like truth, even without solid evidence to support it. What made the situation even more intriguing was how relatable it felt to the audience. Many people projected their own emotions into the story, imagining how they would react in a similar position. Would they feel uncomfortable? Would they watch? Or would they choose to look away? That personal connection blurred objectivity, making it easier for speculation to take over. Instead of asking what was actually happening, people began focusing on what they believed should be happening. At the same time, there were details that didn't quite align with the narrative being built. Public appearances together showed no visible tension, no signs of conflict that matched the dramatic theories circulating online. In fact, their interactions appeared grounded, calm, and consistent, qualities that didn't fit the idea of a relationship under strain. But those moments received far less attention, overshadowed by the more provocative version of the story that people found harder to ignore. And yet, the more the rumor spread, the more one crucial detail continued to be overlooked. The assumption that not watching automatically meant not supporting was never actually questioned. It became the foundation of the entire narrative, even though it was based on interpretation rather than confirmation. That single misunderstanding shaped how everything else was perceived, turning a private decision into a public mystery. By the time the story reached its peak, it had evolved far beyond its original form. What started as a small, almost insignificant detail had grown into a widely discussed topic, filled with emotion, judgment, and speculation. But beneath all of that noise, there was still a missing piece, something simple, something real, something that had been there all along but rarely acknowledged. And once that missing piece comes into focus, the entire story begins to shift in a way that no one expected. What if the entire narrative was built on a misunderstanding from the very beginning? The assumption that Amelia Warner avoids watching Jamie Dornan's films because of discomfort or jealousy sounds compelling, but it quietly ignores a much simpler, more human explanation. Not watching doesn't automatically mean rejecting, and distance doesn't always signal a problem. In fact, in this case, it may reveal something far stronger than what people were expecting. When you look closer, the idea starts to shift. Being married to someone in an industry like film doesn't mean you have to experience every part of their work in the same way the public does. For Amelia Warner, choosing not to watch certain roles may not be about discomfort at all, but about maintaining a clear emotional boundary between the person she knows and the characters he plays. That distinction can be incredibly important, especially when those roles are intense, intimate, and designed to feel real. There's also a level of trust that often goes unnoticed in these situations. If there were insecurity or doubt, the reaction might look very different, more controlling, more reactive, more visible. Instead, what we see is the opposite: a quiet confidence, a lack of need to monitor or engage with something that doesn't define their relationship. And sometimes, that kind of trust expresses itself not through constant involvement, but through the freedom to step back. It's also worth considering how support can take many forms, not all of them public or obvious. Amelia Warner has never built her role as a partner around visibility or performance. She doesn't need to appear at every premiere or publicly comment on every project to prove anything. Support, in this context, can exist behind the scenes, in conversations no one hears, in moments no one sees, in a shared understanding that doesn't require external validation. What the public often overlooks is how different real relationships are from the expectations placed on them. There's a tendency to believe that closeness must always be visible, that love must always be demonstrated in ways that can be easily recognized. But in reality, some of the strongest connections are the ones that don't need to be constantly displayed. They exist quietly, without needing to align with anyone else's definition of what they should look like. This is where the entire story takes on a different meaning. What was once interpreted as avoidance begins to look more like intentional separation, a way to protect both personal identity and emotional clarity. It allows Jamie Dornan to fully inhabit his roles without those performances bleeding into the private life, and it allows Amelia Warner to maintain a connection with who he is beyond the screen. Instead of creating distance between them, it may actually be what keeps their relationship grounded. And that's the twist that changes everything. The most surprising part of this story isn't that she doesn't watch, it's that she doesn't need to. In a world where people constantly seek reassurance through visibility and proof, choosing not to engage can actually be a sign of certainty. It reflects a level of security that doesn't rely on seeing, checking, or confirming, because the foundation is already strong enough on its own. So the next time a story like this surfaces, it might be worth asking a different question. Not, why is she avoiding it? But, why do we assume she should be watching in the first place? Because sometimes, what looks like distance from the outside is actually something much deeper on the inside, a quiet, steady form of trust that doesn't need to explain itself to anyone. So the next time a story like this surfaces, it might be worth asking a different question. Not, why is she avoiding it? But, why do we assume she should be watching in the first place? Because sometimes, what looks like distance from the outside is actually something much deeper on the inside, a quiet, steady form of trust that doesn't need to explain itself to anyone. So the next time a story like this surfaces, it might be worth asking a different question. Not, why is she avoiding it? But, why do we assume she should be watching in the first place? Because sometimes, what looks like distance from the outside is actually something much deeper on the inside, a quiet, steady form of trust that doesn't need to explain itself to anyone.